Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 18 of the Shiny Developer Series. My name is Eric Nance, and I am delighted that you've joined us again today. I am really excited for this episode as I have a guest that I've seen across the various conferences for a long time, and I've always been fascinated by her work with Shiny and also the practicalities of leveraging R and Shiny within data science workflows. And she is finally here to talk about some great advice how she structures her projects for Shiny development and the ways that she can turn real value very quickly from simple prototypes to major production applications. So let's not wait any longer. Let's talk with the founder and CEO of TCB Analytics, Tanya Cashorali. Well, welcome everybody. We are back with another awesome edition of the Shiny Developer Series, and I am so thrilled to be joined by the founder of TCB Analytics and pro Shiny developer, Tanya Cashorali. So, Tanya, thanks so much for joining us today.
No problem. Hi, Eric. Glad to
Uh,
be here.
It's great to see you virtually again. We crossed paths before at our studio comp, and it's,
Yep.
like I said, great to connect again. And maybe you could tell us a little bit to lead off with your journey with R and how you discovered Shiny.
Sure. Yeah. So my first experience with R was back when I was a undergrad at Northeastern University in Boston. I was doing a co-op program, which means you intern for like 6 months and at a time, and then work 6 months. And I was at Children's Hospital Informatics program, working under a PI there who basically said, here's a bunch of gene expression data from normal mouse brain development, and here's a bunch of gene expression data from tumor cells in mice. And we want you to analyze this using something called R and do something called gene set enrichment analysis, which was a package made out at the Broad Institute at the time. And this was back in 2005 or so. So, of course, I was like, oh boy, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'd never heard of R. I actually printed out the entirety of the CRAN documentation, which was a total waste of paper, but
Yeah, been there,
brought it.
done that. Use the
Yeah,
grad school printer to do it too. Yeah.
exactly. And I took it home that summer, I think, and started reading.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was fortunate to have some really smart, PhD mentors there that helped me and answered my at the time pretty silly questions, but yeah, learned a lot there, and that was my first kind of foray into R. Shiny came a lot later, as you must know.
Yes, right. And so, yeah, so we have similar paths. I learned it in grad school right around the same time you just mentioned, and
Really,
it was a lot different back then. Everybody
no
that's
R
learning
Studio.
know our studio, none of
No.
these niceties, whether it's the package collections or the IDEs. I mean, heck, even Visual Studio Code's coming up nice. I mean, there's all sorts of tools that we can use for development where before it was like some text editor on Windows. I don't know, it's like TinR or something. I forgot, but it was
I just use
a
the R
painful
stu the
exercise.
R console and or
Yeah.
yeah, you and I are like the equivalent of this is like the I had to go up and down the hill in the snow to
Back in
school.
my day, people, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, good. Well, so we're gonna have a lot to connect on those perspectives too, for
Y-
sure.
Yeah.
I think most people know you for doing your own kind of consulting gig with TCB Analytics. Maybe you could tell us a bit about how you, yeah, rocking the swag, of course. So, how did TCB Analytics get off the ground?
Yeah, so after that experience, I ended up starting my career in biotech in Boston at a
Mm-hmm.
really cool startup where we were building massive Bayesian networks and reverse engineering essentially causal models on gene expression data, molecular data, omics data in an effort to understand how specific patients would respond to, say, perturbations to the system, where a perturbation is something like um, a dose of a drug or any kind of um, different dose of a drug, different kinds of drugs, and so on. Based on their genetic makeup, how would they respond? Um, that's where I learned a vast majority of my R coding and a lot of the statistical techniques that we use today at TCB Analytics. But after that, did a couple other startups actually outside of healthcare, but still within very data-rich industries like finance, CPG, sports, healthcare, even government. And eventually, I just kind of saw, a lot of consulting shops that were coming into the companies I was working at over engineering solutions or relying too heavily on proprietary software like IBM or SAS, and really just delivering like a PowerPoint, for a lot of money. And I just felt like I could do something better. We have such good tools, especially with R Markdown, and so on. Um, so the idea behind TCB was not only could we help with delivering, lower cost solutions using open source software like R. We do some Python as well,
Hmm.
but we're mainly an R shop. Um, but we meet at the intersection between like the very technical and the business users, and so we can help deliver that value, and bring that scientific rigor that I learned in the academia side of things in a company that was founded by PhDs out of Cornell, founded by statisticians, uh, but we were delivering a business solution. So the whole idea is we kind of bridge that world between scientific rigor and getting stuff done. Like we don't have 5 years to write a thesis. We have 3 months to deliver a solution and make sure we do it right.
Right, right. Yeah, it's a totally different perspective, but I think, the experience that you brought into play is really helpful as you work with I'm sure a vast array of clients and different industries, but yet there is still that kind of commonality of, well, we got to implement a solution. We want to do it in a robust way, something that can be maintained down the road, but be able to not have to be bogged down in a month's work, many months' work of just research for the sake of research. You got to get stuff done. And it sounds like
Exactly.
the tooling in R, and we're going to be talking about Shiny a bit here, has enabled you all to really turn these solutions hopefully quickly and efficiently.
Yeah, exactly. It's been amazing, which is why our community is great, and I try to always support back and give back and give it shout outs when I can, because we built our consultancy around the art environment and
Yeah,
ecosystem.
absolutely. And even in me being in a specific company, I am in somewhat of a consulting role with different teams
Hmm.
in the organization. And there are different ones that have different needs. Some do need that rather infamous PowerPoint at the end of some ETL kind of
Yeah.
analysis, but it's a reality, right?
Yep. Yep.
And and others need like the most complex thing interacting with HPC and APIs on the web. So there's a healthy mix of things, but it
Yeah.
all, we have the
Right,
tools
and
to
we
do
and
it.
we usually deliver, a PowerPoint along with it, but we always like to
Hmm.
try to give them like a takeaway. Like you're gonna have a shiny dashboard that you can take
Yep.
away from this and use, or you're gonna have some R reports or Markdown or something
Right.
that they can take and reproduce and use and have long lasting value from.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so obviously, a lot of these teams are working in data science and statistics. So maybe you could tell us some of the key ways that you see these teams in data science that are creating values for their particular organizations, and especially with some of the tooling that you're helping with them to create or to deliver on analytical results. What are some of the things you're seeing there?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because I've worked in, startups where it's all data scientists. There's a couple, operational VPs and heads, but
Mm-hmm.
um, that's always interesting because it's when you're a small company. But then I've had the experience of working in like a Fortune 500 that's very siloed. Um, and the way I've seen the data scientists work there and how I worked was probably similar to what you've done, which is we're like a consulting arm to the entire company.
Yes.
So yeah, people come to us and it could be from global operations or commercial or
Mm-hmm.
biostatistics or whatever, what have you. And the interesting thing about that model is that we learn a lot about the entire company as data scientists. We're almost like moles that are implanted throughout. And I can't tell you how many times I'd see someone in one department building something that someone else could use, or one department's rebuilding the wheel. Um,
Right.
or there's data sources that this one department's using that could be incredibly supplemental for this other department. So we get to kind of, in a way, bridge those gaps, and it feels like a superpower in a way because you've got all this exposure to the whole company and the data strategy and what's happening. So that can be really interesting. The way I see data scientists though providing the most value is by bringing them into the projects early on, during the requirements gathering phase, um, because the way the data is gathered can make or break a project.
Absolutely. Yes.
Especially in pharma and healthcare. Like if you're designing
Right.
experiments, you need to make sure you have the right number of samples, that you're going to have enough, degrees of freedom to do all the calculations that you need to do.
Right.
Um, and if you need to measure success, well, we need to collect metrics that are measurable, that we can say before, after, there was an improvement. So Yeah, I just see I'm seeing a lot of different ways that companies are starting to use us, but I think getting us there at the outset of a project is smarter than saying, "Hey, we have this data, we need you to salvage and find like a needle in the haystack and
Right.
provide because we spent a lot of money on this data, we need you to pull out value from it."
Yeah, and as much as I would like that to go away, it's never going to go away anytime soon. But
I
we
know.
did, at least in the projects I work on, we had the most success when we were brought in at the early stages, and then we can inform things like architecture design or what are the value statements that we're going to, get out of this analysis so that everybody knows tangibly why we're investing all this time and money into building maybe a new application that's supposed to be a front end to a brand new analytical workflow flow.
Yep.
I have seen situations where we got brought in way too late, and we can try and rescue it as best we can, but you can't do everything.
Yeah, it's not magic.
Not at all, not at all. So certainly, let's dive into some of the cool tech that I'm sure you've been building. So how has maybe we could start with some of the techniques that you've been using as you've been developing Shiny applications for your various clients, as how you go from, say, prototyping a solution to making that production ready, which is something I think only recently started to become more of a focus in the Shiny community. But I'd love to get your take on some of the techniques you like to do there.
Yeah, it's so I've been a big proponent of this rapid prototyping thing. People are probably sick of me harping on it at this point, but it really is powerful. I've been in companies where we try to guess what the customer wants, like without really having requirements from them or without really testing anything or putting anything in front of them. Um, I've seen 6 months of development time be wasted only to build like a Corvette when they wanted, a Ford truck.
Exactly.
So I've started to really be a proponent of this rapid prototyping idea, which is, exactly what it sounds like. Especially for data products, there's just so many things that you can't predict with data. So we just start to build it. I've taken pictures drawn on napkins from clients and turned it into, something for them to react to within a week.
Absolutely. Yep.
You know, um, and then when they see it, suddenly they're like, "Oh, you know what? I didn't realize like I don't want to see this here, and I actually need a filter on this, and I didn't realize, the thresholds of how many samples you have by state would
Right.
be an issue.
Right.
How would you know that ahead of time?" Um, so anyway, we do a lot of that, and then what's nice about it is the client feels very involved. It's very iterative, very collaborative,
Mm-hmm.
and then by the time we need to productionize it a bit, which is kind of becoming less and less of a thing with our given like our Connect, our Server Studio Pro. Um, it's already widely spread kind of throughout the company and gained a lot of traction.
Yeah, that's great to have those deployment targets. And like you said, the real value is you're taking this whiteboardy back of napkin ideas, and with a little bit of experience, you can, like you said, quickly turn that around to something they can react to. And yeah, I have seen through my experience that once they see something and they see how valuable it is or they see how intuitive it is, they want more. It's
Yeah,
never enough the first time. And I'm completing a major project as we speak where I am kind of that person telling me I want more because I want to be like one of the leading users of the very thing I'm making. So it's
yeah,
it's been a fun year in that sense. But yeah, you always there's just when they see the potential, there's
yeah.
always more that they can do. That's for
No,
sure.
it's crazy, and it can be a good thing and a bad thing, right? You
That's
can
true.
fall into this trap of scope creep, and let's just add more, add more, add more, and it
Yes.
just can be never ending. Because especially, I'll say it again with data products, like there's just so much that can be done,
Yeah.
especially with rich data sets. So you know, the, one of the ways we try to safeguard around that is obviously scope. Very detailed. Here's what we're trying to accomplish. We're going to
Mm-hmm.
include this many either variables or scenarios, and
Yep.
go from there.
Absolutely. So, what, why don't we dive into some specifics? If you have some demos you'd like to share with us on a few of the apps you've worked on that you're able
Yeah.
to share, let's go ahead and dive into those.
Okay. Let me know. I'm gonna load up. This is one that we're actually hosting right now. A majority of our applications are hosted on Shiny Apps I believe it's the standard tier. And let me zoom out here so you can see this. So, given the screen size, it may be a little squished, but in order for you to see it, this is for a company called Sports Innovation Lab based out of Boston, where we're based out of and where I'm originally from. Recently relocated to Florida during quarantine, but that's another topic. Anyway, the can you see this dashboard?
Absolutely, looking great.
Okay, so just a high level overview is that this company is tracking the way that fans engage with sports, whether it's through betting or watching on TV or social. They're tracking the latest in technology like augmented reality, virtual reality, sensors on the athletes, and all that fun stuff. That said, they get most of their information from domain experts and market experts on their team, but they're a data driven company such that they're tracking a lot of news articles. And I'm talking, I want to say they're getting on the order of thousands of articles into their system a day. So what you're seeing here is a way to understand what is spiking in the news abnormally as compared to like its typical news coverage. So what we're looking at right now are teams, and these teams are across multiple sports. And so you can see here that I'm going to switch to a different sport. I'm going to go to the NBA. And on the right, we have a table just showing some basic statistics. This will highlight if there's anything out of the norm. But
Hmm.
what we're looking at on the left side is a list of the most recent quote unquote anomalies. So we're using the Twitter's anomaly detection package just to look at the frequency that these teams are being mentioned in the news.
Oh, that's cool.
Um, Yeah, so let's click on one. November 3rd, this was a couple weeks ago, the Memphis Grizzlies. And we scroll down. Here's a chart showing the anomalies that were detected.
Hmm.
And there's this big spike on the 3rd. I want to see what's going on. Well, we pull in the articles making up that spike, and it looks like they announced a strategic partnership with FanDuel.
Oh, wow.
So if you're not familiar with FanDuel, it's an online sports betting platform. And we can actually click out and, go to the articles as well.
Oh, this is fascinating. This is a lot of concepts that I may dive into a little bit here, but what you've effectively done here is the idea of cross linking. You've got one table that's kind of like the first pass into more detailed results, and then you're able to bring that on demand with these basically these click events and now this pop over. That is really slick.
Yeah, this is one thing I use a lot is being able to click a table or click a chart and then drill down to get more detail. This one isn't, it's not the prettiest. This is actually an internal facing tool for their analysts.
Mm-hmm.
How I envision something like this is being used is basically um, to keep the analysts informed and streamlining a lot of the work, the manual work that they would typically have to do.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're doing the curation kind of detection for them, and with that novel use of that anomaly package, now they're able to simply go from sport to sport or do custom filtering as appropriate. Yeah, that's really nice.
Yep, exactly. And of course, we have to get a shiny.
It's
Though
a
this
it's a
is
demo.
querying,
What you can do.
yeah, this is querying the live, a live database as well of
Ah,
articles.
yes. Okay. Yep.
So let me also show you. We could do the same thing with vendors. So that was teams.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're also interested in tracking vendors. Who's on the cutting edge of, diving into the sports arena? Because
Oh,
there's obviously a lot of money to be made in sports. There's a lot of possibility there. So it looks like in the past few months, Tencent, this company had an increase in its mentions in the news. So I'm going to go down again and look at my chart, and it looks like that's because the Premier League struck a deal with Tencent.
I see. Yep. That would do it.
And so, like you're quickly eyeballing it, but a way we took this a step further, and it's not on this dashboard, but is to do some tidy text analysis and just tokenize this and see what are the top mentioned words, and you'd quickly see things like China TV deal,
Sure.
Premier League, and they'd bubble up to the top. So we're streamlining that human process. It's not artificial intelligence by any means, but we're automating a lot of manual work.
Well, I can tell you in the industry, I mean, in many industries for that matter, just the idea of taking away a lot of manual looking up, manual writing, manual curations. It doesn't have to be deep learning or the fancy AI term to bring value right away. And you can build upon this later, as you said. I mean, but this is just taking away a lot of manual effort already.
Exactly. And we're a big proponent of that. They're getting from just number one, streamlining manual analysis to then maybe machine learning to then potentially artificial intelligence. It's a long path. And
Absolutely.
I'd say about 25 to 30% of our clients actually need or machine learning. A
Hmm.
lot of them are just in the basic reporting. We do some anomaly detection like this, and they really need a way to just organize all their data into one place. This is pulling from, probably 6 different tables. This application. So yeah, I think a lot of times AI and machine learning get a little bit overhyped, and people just need something more basic than that before they can get to that complex place.
Yeah, and I think there is some cases where maybe some people in a leadership of an organization hear these fancy terms, I mean buzzwords you might say, and they want to go for that finished product right away on that side of it. But really, if you can just knock out these easier wins first, that makes the late stage so much easier. Plus, this may be good enough for the majority of the people that would use this kind of thing. They don't need all the fancy stuff. They just need something that can service the information effectively and dynamically, which is what you're doing here.
Exactly. And eventually, eventually this would lead to an alerting system. So we've been working with
Yes.
the analysts internally to say, is this right? Does this make sense? Do you care about this? How can we tweak the anomaly detection algorithm?
Mm-hmm.
And then if when they're happy with it, you send them actual email alerts. And that could be a potential customer facing application eventually.
Absolutely. So yeah, and the nice thing is with Shiny's default UI of a few cosmetic tweaks here and there, you're able to get something in front of them quite quickly, and they can navigate through it effectively. And yeah, that's looking really good.
Exactly. So that's that example. There's a lot more here that I'm not going to get into, but um, I'll get into another example. Let's look at. So this one is another anomaly detection app. Now, before I show you it, it's for a company that creates rapid blood test machines and provides them for hospitals really all over the country. Uh, and there's these sensors on the machines that are constantly emitting all kinds of metrics on
Mm-hmm.
the performance, on the measurements, and so on. And previously, it's a lot of data, as you can imagine. Uh, Previously, they would get potentially a complaint in the field from a hospital, a provider, saying this machine is malfunctioning. And when they go and look back at the sensor data, they realize, wow, that we actually could have caught this ahead of time before it went out into the field.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're helping them do in an automated, again, more automated way. They were doing it pretty manually before. So what you're looking at here is they have 4 different data sources they can choose from. We're going to stick with this Elm one for now, which just means this is before it went out into the field. This is early life monitoring of the machines. We can specify a date range, and I'm just going to put this to like September. We're going to actually look for alerts, which are high, medium, and low significance anomalies. And the default is we remove outliers, and I'll show you why in a second. So this is querying a live database as well. And what you're seeing on the bottom is just all the different iterations that we're going through. We're looking at different analytes, things like lactate, glucose, and then different measurement hours, different types of aggregations. And so there's, I want to say, few dozen of those combinations.
Wow.
Now, now this is a little smushed because of the zoom, but hopefully you can see it. Between this time frame, there were 54 high significance that were found, 8 medium, 0 low, and we've got them all listed here. So one thing I can do is click one, and if I scroll down, I get the chart of that exact anomaly that was identified.
Nice. Okay. Yep.
Yep. And then, as a convenience, what I did by clicking on that was automatically update all of the fields here.
This is awesome. So I've even started using this technique more this year, is the fact that you can not only update other outputs or other parts of your main body, but then you can predefine or redefine the choices that are available to the user and lead them in the right direction. So I've used more of those update family of functions
Yeah,
way more this year than I ever did in the previous 4 or 5 years I did with Shiny, because I finally mastered it. So this is another great example of that.
it's really nice. Yeah, it's the Shiny JS package, right?
Oh yes, yes.
That's another. Yeah, so you
It's a
can
cornerstone of my dev toolbox. Yep.
exactly. So I advise them to start at the alerts tab, run it on the time frame they're interested in,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can just dig in. You can say, oh wow, this is interesting. Click it. Gives you a chart here, but then I want to dig in more. So again, it brings you here, and now you can play with all these other filters as well. Maybe you don't want to. Oh, here, I'll get back to the outliers. Maybe I don't want to remove outliers. Watch how much this chart changes.
Oh, I'm afraid to ask. Oh, yep, there sure is. Yep.
They changed a little bit. There were some of these I
Okay.
think were picked up top. There are some
Mm-hmm.
examples, if I can find one, that where they're just massive spikes that here they are. So
Yes, yes.
so in working with the client, he told us, there's going to be things that are just complete faulty
Mm-hmm.
machine reading failures that we don't want to consider even in the realm of possibility, and that's going to affect anomaly detection greatly. The anomaly detection algorithm is very dependent on what gets put into it. So just so you can see as a comparison, I'm going to remove outliers on this example, and now we actually have none detected.
Yeah, that's what a difference, right? But just
Yep,
giving them that option, then they can figure out, oh, why don't we have anything there? Oh, that's why it
exactly.
was an outlier.
And then if I really relax, even the IQR, so typically it's one and a
Mm-hmm.
half times, standard deviation.
Sure.
We can actually for this client, it made sense to actually expand on that interquartile range, and then we do pull up one here, which they'd probably look at and say, nah, it's just way out of the bounds of what we
Right.
typically look at.
Yep, but you're leading them to make an informed decision. In the end, it's up to them to decide. Is that really an anomalous finding that they have to investigate? Yep.
Exactly. And what's really cool about this is they've been using it and bringing it to team meetings. They've been finding things that they're actually investigating, and they found a few examples now that were real and that they wouldn't have discovered, without using this tool.
Yes, and again, the interactivity is huge here, and I have parts in the work I do where some of them are still into that whole. Let's print out a whole bunch of plots as statically as possible and thumb through them one by one and try to. But
Eh,
sorry, it's 2020. We can do better, right?
yeah, and actually that's funny you mentioned that because that's exactly how I started when we were initially developing the algorithm and the different parameters. I
Uh huh.
had written a script that basically iterated and created like 30 PDFs. And so I was looking through them, presenting them to the client, saying, does this make sense? And eventually, this actually became a tool for me that helped me refine the algorithm and just quickly, select different measures and be able to iterate on what makes sense and what doesn't. So that's how I played with the alpha value here. That's your significance.
Yep.
That's how I played with different combinations of that, removing outliers. So Shiny makes it just so easy to quickly iterate on things like that.
Yes, I did a very similar thing where in the early part of my industry career, I was in charge of analyzing a whole bunch of proteomic biomarker data collected from
Yep.
patient samples. And there was like maybe 200 or so markers. And yeah, the early days of my development, I printed a 200-page PDF basically. Each had the same plot, just a different marker. And then after I discovered Shine, I was like, wait a minute. I just have a little drop down, let them choose the marker, and then it just renders it dynamically. It's like, where was this many years ago? But
Oh, I know. I could have used the Shiny a long time ago.
yes, yes. Oh
Yeah.
man, in my dissertation, I could have taken a whole different level, but that's another story. Now, when you mentioned something in the early part of this demo is that, and even the last one, is that you're interacting with different, data sources, everything like that.
Yep.
So I deal with this quite a bit too, where I have to integrate my Shiny apps with different systems and
hmm
different, endpoints or API endpoints, things like that. So what's that been like for you? Have you what kind of advice do you have for those that have to integrate Shiny with different systems and kind of the development workflow you have for that operation?
Yeah. So we've integrated Shiny with a lot of different systems and backends specifically. Typically, we start, especially because it's hard to access to client databases right away. We usually start with a flat file, and we build it assuming that we're going to be switching it over pretty seamlessly to, say, a live database.
Mm-hmm.
So um, there are things that we think about at the outset, which are like understanding how all of the different pieces are going to work together. Number one, will we be pulling directly from the database? Will we be pulling from a batch job run nightly? Will we be pulling from an API? So all of that kind of drives how we're going to set up and design the application at the outset. Um, the different different databases we've actually worked with, just for curiosity's sake, if you're interested, is MongoDB.
Mm-hmm.
We actually wrote our own R package to query uh, MongoDB from R, because at the time it was actually probably 5 years ago. There wasn't a package that enabled authentication with the version of Mongo we were using. So
I see. Okay.
that was yeah. Obviously SQL Server, Postgres, all the main sort of relational databases,
Hmm.
and then both AWS connecting to Redshift. We've connected R now to Snowflake, so two columnar databases. Really, I mean, you can connect R and Shiny to anything, right? Just like any other
Yep.
programming language. And sometimes people don't realize that.
Absolutely.
Um, the other thing that we've done, we've integrated with different front ends, right? So there are some uh, charts, even in the R packages, even though there's been a ton of amazing work around being able to create D3 charts. There's packages like Network D3, High Charter.
Hmm.
Sometimes you still need more customization on the JavaScript D3 side.
Sure.
So we do have a couple projects where we use custom D3 on the front end and connected to Shiny on the back end using HTML widgets, basically, and we have all the flexibility we need then, and charting. You're not stuck with just like the R packages are available, basically.
Yeah, mentioning D3, that's actually a callback to one of our episodes last year where we had Nick Strayer talk about the R2D3 pack and some of the cool stuff he was doing to do that customization. But yeah, there are now even interfaces within R to get to that added customization. And yeah, there's so much power you can do with a little D3 magic, and it can go a long way.
Yeah, I mean, and one thing to think about too, it's really new. It's called the Arrow package by
Yes.
Apache. I mean, if you're going to be integrating with other languages, especially, I mean, there's the Reticulate package, right,
Yep.
to call Python scripts from R. But Arrow now provides this easily exchangeable shared data format, which is going to be just a game changer, I think. So I'm going to try to start when you're building a Shiny app that you know is going to integrate with other languages. You probably want to check out Arrow. Um, it's also just blazingly fast. We were able to query like 4 billion rows and run an aggregation and filter in like 3 seconds on my local machine.
Oh, that's who would have thought that years ago when you and I were learning all this stuff the first time that we'd
Oh,
get that
geez.
capability. My
Yeah,
goodness.
I was connecting to IBM Blue Gene and supercomputers to do stuff like that and having to do all the
Exactly.
parallel processing. So,
Yep.
and then the only other thing I'd mention is if you're going to be integrating with other systems, sometimes you'll want to build your app and your R script such that they can be called from a command line. So
Yes.
think about ways to send parameters and be able to call it from anywhere.
Yeah, and that the kind of theme of that I've been doing a lot this year is that my apps are now packages. I actually wrap them in
Oh,
Golem
nice.
now, and but the
Okay.
key part is that I'm putting out the business logic away from like the real app code per se. They're just function calls that you could technically execute outside the app, so that it makes testing a lot easier. If like I know what UI params I was going to set, I can just run those as like feeding into the function instead, and then debug the heck out of that business logic kind
That's
of thing
nice. Yeah.
before I get into the issue of, okay, is it time in the UI and all that. So that's definitely, that's good advice to make sure that you can at least evaluate or test these connections outside your app.
Right.
And I've had a lot of experience of API integrations where I'm actually going to try and get more involved with Plumber because that's such a
Hmm.
awesome package to make APIs from R.
Yeah, it
But
is.
certainly I've been getting more involved with, okay, if I can just connect to an API via, say, HTTR, one of those packages, what are the status codes I'm getting back? Do all that stuff outside the app first, then fold it in when you're ready and you got that kind of work in working order.
Exactly, and that's how I typically do all my Shiny apps is just the R code outside of
Mhm.
Shiny. Then you just kind of plug it in. It's pretty easy once you know R to build a Shiny app.
Absolutely. And the examples you've shown thus far are kind of this nice mix of dashboardy like solutions and with some real integrated outputs into that. So, in what cases do you typically use like a dashboardy like solution versus a more kind of traditional, like, here's your inputs, here's your outputs setting?
Yeah. So we built a really cool app at a pharma company I was at that was more like a model simulation type dashboard. It was still a dashboard, but it was much more like plug in your inputs and your parameters. And it was for clinical trial enrollment. So we were trying to predict when patients would be completely recruited at each individual site.
Mm-hmm.
So we could code in parameters like the rate at which they're enrolling, the population around there, um, the disease population around there, and then also even a code in uh, exceptions for things like if there was an earthquake in this particular country where the site is, we have to shut down enrollment. That's going to affect our model.
Sure.
So that was more like we were running an MC just simulation, and it would give you inputs and then outputs, and we would take that and then deliver it to the client. So that was more like a tool for us. I see most of Shiny dashboards are like either internal kind of sandboxy prototyping for playground, essentially.
Yeah.
Like
Mm-hmm.
I think that's important for all data science teams to have, is somewhere to play, build out potential new product ideas, but then also have internal tools that like you and I use that help us with our own day to day.
Absolutely.
And then there's like the client facing, which are usually dashboards,
Mm-hmm.
at least for us. And I do have one more if we have time.
Oh yeah, please let's see it.
Okay. So as you can tell, I love Shiny. It's like one of
That
my favorite
that's
things
why
to
I'm
do.
doing this dev series. Yeah.
So this is for another farmer company. We've um, anonymized, the IDs and everything, and have their permission to show this one. So this is uh, they are tracking basically all of their different studies using this dashboard. Uh, Things like protocol deviations in their clinical trial. So when something goes wrong, they need to know where it's happening, which site, so they can address it. Is it a training issue? Uh, and basically what you're seeing right now is just a high level overview of the deviations happening by study,
Mm-hmm.
both major and minor alone. And this is a quick, like I come in, I get a high level overview. Okay, I want to look at the USA only. I want to look at a specific site. So it will allow you to kind of do all that level of filtering. And that's just where you come in. It gets more interesting when you actually dig into the protocol deviations.
Oh, I
So
bet. Yeah.
we have, for this study, the number of enrolling sites, the number of subjects enrolled. So there's 10 at 5 different sites, how many deviations, and then how many deviations per enrolled or randomized patient. And then this heat map here, and let me get a bigger study so it's a little bit easier to understand. This heat map is showing the breakdown of uh, deviation types. So was it some
Oh,
kind of
what a
IP
nice way to
compliance?
represent that info. Yeah, that's a really cool technique.
Yeah, and you can see the major, minor, it groups them differently. Um, you know, darker green means there's more. And then we have the table breakdown of what's basically making up that heat map.
Oh, that is cool. And you've even augmented it with tooltips. So Plotly for the win there. That is
Plotly,
really
yeah,
nice. Yeah.
Plotly's a game changer, and I love ggplotly because you can just write their ggplot code and then wrap
Yes.
ggplotly around it.
Yeah, I've been starting to use Plotly in more of my Shiny apps, and the things you can do with the interactions between the Plotly output and to like say a table like you're doing here, or other things like when you zoom in or you select items.
Yep.
Oh, it's almost addicting after a while. The cool things you can do with this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and like the Plotly event clicks we use a lot. I
Yes.
don't have it in this example, but you could click basically a box and it might filter something else.
Yep.
That's really easy in Plotly. And then we can filter over here by say majors and look at, well, which site is most problematic. Well, there's only one person enrolled here, so I'm going to actually sort. And now I'm looking at my deviations. This one's kind of interesting. What's going on in Poland? So
Oh,
I can
sure.
click it and I get this
The
chart updates and it looks like
IP
IP
compliance.
compliance.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And if we scroll down, we actually get the drill down detailed information as well.
Yep, and this is another example of going away from those dreaded static outputs across different domains and being able to put it all in
Yes.
one place. This is really cool.
Yeah, and the way they were previously doing this was literally manually curating a PowerPoint every week, and it took them
Yes.
several days. And now we basically get a dump of data every month and upload it, and it's hosted for them on Shiny Apps, and they're using it, in their strategic meetings with senior leadership every week.
Well, ironically, this is something that my own company is wrestling with quite a bit. So I've got some food for thought for maybe a future application idea.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's been really fun, and yeah, all these clients, especially when you're working with Shiny, they love it. They're really happy with the visuals, the interactivity, and because we treat it as, hey, we're building this together iteratively. This is our, you have a group of kind of friendlies at the outset, and then when
Hmm.
we all feel comfortable and confident in the numbers and the visuals, then they get to unveil it to the wider audience, and it's just fun.
Absolutely. And yeah, maybe you could talk a bit kind of on the practical side as you're starting one of these projects. What is the kind of the level of engagement in the early stages? And is it you doing most of the development? Do you work with a team of developers as you make these, like from the other organization? How does that typically work in your projects?
Yeah, typically it's been us and our team build it, and
Hmm.
we're working usually with like a point person that's kind of in charge of either the data team over there or in charge of some kind of, say, clinical operations. So we tend to do most of the development, but we also have done handoffs to, if they have data scientists in house, they get all the code, we have it all commented, we'll do like a knowledge transfer. Um, we have had a couple instances where we do work with another developer. Uh, no big surprise, there still aren't many Shiny developers out there.
Yeah, I know. I've been through quite a few.
Yeah, so we tend to do like weekly updates, and
Hmm.
just it's really cool to see the get the feedback, because they don't really know until they can see it, and then they're able to quickly say, like, for example, this site monitoring compliance, just recently we got some feedback that they wanted to add another filter here.
Hmm.
They want to not only be able to multi-select country, but they want to have an automatic filter on year to date, and then I think it's since inception. So we're actually going to add some kind of KPI boxes like we have here. These value boxes are great.
I know.
Um,
I use them all the time. Yep.
yeah, and we're just going to put that there, and that's something that they're not going to know they want until they see something like this.
Yeah, that's the key is that you give them something to react to, but when it's just like on a blank canvas, it's very difficult to get those ideas. But if you start somewhere and like you said, the UI pieces that things like Shiny Dashboard or some of the newer ones out there they give you, it just opens the floodgates sometimes.
Yes, for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely.
So those are all my demos I have. We have obviously a ton more projects we've done, and those are the ones I got permission to share, and um,
Yeah.
they've been good projects so far.
Absolutely, yeah. It should be inspiring to our audience quite a bit if they want to, take some of these ideas in their projects as well. That's actually a good segue as we were talking about kind of like the development in a team environment. You just mentioned it is hard to find really talented, shiny developers out there. And obviously, a success of TCB Analytics is that you are very proficient with Shiny, so you're able to get these projects. But if those of us that are maybe looking to add new developers into our organization or whatever group we have, what advice do you have as you've been working with in team environments to maximize kind of that value of that partnership or to find the really talented developers out there? I don't know what that journey has been like for you.
Yeah. So let's see. I mean, I know for me, and finding talent and people that are just love this stuff, is I started out going to meetups, obviously,
Hmm.
finding the people presenting, finding the people even attending, and have made hires to former companies that way. In terms of getting them to be really effective, I always say, I mean, don't hire these people as if they're just going to go sit in a back corner and then disappear and come back with something that you magically want. They need to be exposed to the business, exposed to the key stakeholders, decision makers, because ultimately you're building something that is going to drive decision making.
Right.
So get them the exposure, visibility, especially when hiring full time people. And we've done surveys on this actually, on what data scientists want, and a lot of them, it's salary and all that other stuff is typically down on the list compared to, I'm making a difference, I'm pushing the needle forward in my company, I'm getting visibility to the key decision makers, and just feel that my work has an impact.
Hmm.
So if you can do all those things, and then if you've got cool data, interesting problems, you're and they have these different tools at their disposal, you're typically going to have a easier time hiring people.
Yeah, I think that engagement's really important because I think some of the traditional kind of IT processes of developing products or apps or whatever you want to call it, they do still have that tendency of like, okay, we're going to hire this person who just knows JavaScript very well. They're going to do all the UI stuff. Then we have someone else that does the back end stuff, and they're all just going to be in their own silos. They come together once a month, and they're like, no, this doesn't work this way. And then the product owners are like, no, that's not what we intended. And they have to go back.
Yeah.
It's best to get on the same page quickly. Um, I've
Yes.
seen situations where I took my eye off for a little bit and it went in a completely different direction than what I wanted. So
Right.
it's an art that's never perfected. But
And what's
yeah.
your ideal kind of? I'm going to interview you now. What's your ideal shiny kind of project and situation?
So I mean, definitely getting started early. I think that the key is figuring out a way to translate the different capabilities that we have to offer, which you can do, like you just said, just about anything is Shiny. It's about knowing the audience and what they're really going to do with this app. Some
Yeah.
people will just be like, it's a sandbox. They're just going to look at some info and then that's kind of it. Others
Yeah.
are going to be like, hey, I got this important milestone coming up of like a data transfer or something. I need it to work and I need it to work perfectly because I'm going to demo it with leadership on the spot when this data comes in.
Yep.
That's a totally different mindset than the former.
Yep.
So for me, I have to know kind of what the purpose of the app is going to be and then being able to break down kind of what are the UI pieces that are going to need the most attention, what are
Hmm.
some of the more quick wins, and then what are the back end situations, integrations going to be like. And I can tell you from experience, if I know up front that I'm going to have to deal with a high performance computing environment, which I've had 3 apps this past year that have done that,
Hmm.
that is the most painful thing I ever do in Shiny. The most painful. And I'm
Yeah.
not saying that to be mean because that system is really powerful. And when it works, my VP of the organization was amazed that I could get like simulation results in barely 3 minutes that would take a week on somebody's laptop. So, like,
Wow.
that is like, okay, that's why I do what I do.
Yeah.
But getting to that point, I just have to prepare myself. It is like the open heart surgery of Shiny development when you have to do HPC integrations.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, ours single threaded by nature, right? So it's.
Exactly. But it's and the API stuff's kind of similar, although I feel like there's a lot more out there for debugging like API calls or knowing
Yeah.
how to bring that in so I can kind of get what I need quicker. But when you deal with these compute environments, whether they're cloud-based HPC or just internal, like organization has 700 nodes in a cluster that's all networked together via SunGrid engine or Slurm
Yep.
or whatever have you, it's definitely a different mindset. And that
Yeah.
mindset is so hard to find developers that know how to work with those things.
Yes.
That I mean, just knowing Shiny itself at a level that you think you can build a production grade application, it's hard enough to find.
Yeah.
But then to integrate it with these, you might say, esoteric or more complicated systems, to
Oh
have
yeah.
that expertise in both, tough.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Yeah. Totally agree. Yep. I've seen the same thing pretty much. We had a team of people eventually working on the Shiny app I was building on MongoDB because we
Uh
were
huh.
querying like 16 billion SNPs from genome-wide association studies, and
Yes.
it was
Yes.
just me at first, but then it was like, well, we need someone to kind of help tune the Mongo database, and then we're going to team up on building this art package, and then we had a front end developer to help with paging
Mm-hmm.
because paging through and sorting 16 billion records is you're not sorting the whole thing, or you want to sort, but you want to sort on the back end.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely not on the client side. You're in a world of
No.
hurt then. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was cool the way it came together, and I learned a lot. That's the way you learn a lot though too. Is like, I started out using Shiny when it was just the only help available was the Google group with like Joe Chang and
Fond memories. He was on that list all the time. Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
So yeah, I was building my own like fantasy football apps back then, and all my questions were around that.
Yeah, well, that's an awesome way to learn. Just do something that scratches your own itch sometimes, but you
Yep.
want to use that to build up. And, I've done a little thing with Tidy Tuesday recently where I was just animating some plots of Plotly, but it's like, hey, now I can do it in Plotly. Now I know how to do it later on. So
Yeah.
just little wins like that.
Nice.
The other thing that, setting up like a team of developers for success is when you separate your app out into distinct components. So, and obviously, I'm thinking of modules here from the
Hmm.
Shiny side of it. That way, you can have a certain set of people work on a particular module. They
Right.
can do that without affecting like me doing like some of the HPC stuff or other things like that. And then we can just come together at some point, making sure they all play nicely with each other. But I'm not holding them back; they're not holding me back. If
Right.
we have the code base, structured in such a way that they can edit that stuff, and we don't have to deal with merge conflicts in Git, which are definitely rough when you have a big Shiny app.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, we've done the same thing with like we'll just completely decouple even the statistical modeling and have,
Yes.
our PhD statistician work on that and then have someone
Yes.
dealing with all the making it pretty and front end and file uploads and the basic Shiny component stuff.
Yeah, that process worked very well for me for an app that I hope I can open source later this year, where it was for a COVID
Oh, nice.
design analysis. But we had a talented statistician on my team make the back end package that did like the actual algorithm, the actual simulation. I
Yep.
put the Shiny app as a front end to it. I tied it with HPC, and then I just brought all the outputs after the jobs were done. But yeah, having that back end package saved me so much time and frankly a lot of headaches of having to make that code base so massive with everything in it. But
Right.
just a package, it's got its own repo, it's got its own development life cycle. And that I think more apps need to take that approach if you're going from like the simple dashboard of like one data source and one type of output. Yeah, throw everything in one repo. But when you've got multiple systems involved, yeah, you got to separate that out if you
Yeah,
want
yeah.
any sanity left over.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. And you kind of touched on, the things that we were learning in our development early days. But what do you see opportunities for those out there that are like learning Shiny a bit? They want to start, getting out there and helping people with various projects. Do you see opportunities for a lot of freelance Shiny app development these days, or what's your take on that?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'd say 85% or more of our work right now is Shiny related.
Sure.
I think Shiny Apps.io has a free tier. You can start to
Mm-hmm.
build out your own portfolio, and I think that's a good way to start getting your work out there, drum up some interest. I think there's plenty of opportunity for Shiny development. Sometimes, for us right now, we're fortunate that it's coming to us, but there's a lot of postings, online, in various groups, and people are start the more people start to learn about Shiny, the more it gets out there, just the more work there's going to be. And so we always are trying to get out front and present what we've done and get people excited about it. But plenty of opportunity. And we're always hiring part-time
There we go.
consultants to do Shiny work. So you know where to find me.
Absolutely. Yep. Yep. We'll have all the links in the show notes to all the ways to find you. But we could talk forever. You'll definitely
Oh
be
yeah.
on again at some point. But maybe we could get your thoughts and advice for those that are looking to maybe get involved with Shiny more in like a professional level, maybe finding jobs involving Shiny, or even just advice about learning Shiny in general.
Yeah. So as everyone knows, there's obviously self-paced like online learning
Yep.
programs like Code Academy, but our studio's training videos and everything are fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
The tutorials on there is really how I got started. Um, I would say one thing I wanted to pull up is
Oh,
the
absolutely.
art studio team. Art studio is releasing these. There's tutorials within the IDE itself. So you download our studio, and there is not a Shiny one yet, but I'm actually interested in potentially making one, for the community. So keep an eye out for the our studio IDE tutorials that are integrated right within our studio itself. That's all I wanted to show there. But
Cool.
otherwise, yeah, otherwise, I'd say attending user meetups virtually. Obviously, everything's pretty much virtual right now. The
Mm-hmm.
use our groups are great. Um, our studio hosts one. Start to use publicly available data sets that scratch an itch, like you said about data sets that interest you. Yeah, come up with a question you want to answer and do your analysis in R, and then start putting it into Shiny using some of these tutorials. Um, the other way to just brush up your skills, obviously in R in general, is on Kaggle if you want to start playing around with machine learning.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, we use Shiny actually a lot with when we are doing machine learning projects. We use Shiny to enable our clients to interact with the models themselves. So they can kind of search for, they could provide an input to the model and see what comes out. And that's just a really cool way of making the model interactive and allows us to fine tune and enhance the models themselves based on the user's feedback and interacting with it.
Very cool. Well, like I said, it's been lots of fun to talk to you today, and we'll definitely connect again. But for those that want to get a hold of you, what are the best ways they can reach you?
Twitter is fine, but my
Hmm.
email, our website is tcbanalytics.com,
Hmm.
and there's a contact form there. My direct email is Tanya at tcbanalytics.com.
Well, awesome, Tanya. Like I said, you're welcome back anytime, and it's great to have a kindred spirit who learned R the hard way like me.
Yeah, I could nerd out about this stuff all day, Eric. Thanks
You
for having
bet.
me.
Yep. All right. Well, everybody, we'll be back right after this. All right. My thanks to Tanya for joining us today. And boy, did we have a lot of fun chats even after the recording was stopped. That we definitely will have her back on in the future episodes, as she and I have lots of ideas and a lot of common experiences from learning R in the early days and how we've been leveraging Shiny to bring value within an industry setting. So you'll definitely be seeing her back on. So, in the meantime, if you'd like to learn about past episodes, the best place to go is shinydevseries.com, and you'll find the recording links to all the previous episodes and direct links to the YouTube channel. Also, if you'd like to get in touch, you can find me on Twitter with @theRcast, and there's also a contact link on the Shiny Dev Series site if you'd like to send your feedback that way. All right, well, we're going to close up episode 18. Thank you again for joining us today, and we will see you next time. Until then, end of line.